Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to KageKaze Analytic Gaming Channel. And today we are going to analyze the Diablo 3 patch. Yes, another patch has come out. Patch 2.0.6 is live on official servers. Just came out with really no fanfare that I could detect. I have been kind of busy, but this one was kind of news to me, especially the changes they made. Now, this is a fairly small patch, but despite its diminutive size, it actually comes with some major game-changing additions to it, or well, really subtractions in this case. So let's go over what has changed in this patch. There's only 2 character classes that got any kind of balancing done, and they're only kind of minor. So first is the Barbarian. The animation speed for leap was increased. Blizzard had promised this. The reason for this is there was apparently a discrepancy between the male and female animation for leap on the Barbarians. This was mostly unnoticeable, and in fact it's gone this long without being noticeable because you could only leap once and no one really cared. Pretty much. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. But the reason why people noticed it is there is, I believe it's either a set or a legendary item, I believe it's a set, that allows you to leap multiple times before the cooldown goes on. So, kind of like, say, Wormhole for the Wizard's Teleport, you can just leap multiple times. And it was then noticed that the female barbarians leaped faster than the males, allowing them to get one additional leap out before the cooldown happened. So Blizzard responded to this by nerfing the female leap, I believe by adding a slight delay, so the speed was the same, but you couldn't do it as quickly. Now, naturally, this came with much resistance, and people were very unhappy. There was rioting in the streets. Okay, maybe there were just bad forum posts. So everybody said that this isn't cool, you really shouldn't do that, and Blizzard's like, yeah, you're right, we really agree, we really shouldn't have nerfed it. And so what they wanted to do was bring the speed up so that the male matched the female. Actually, what they said what they were going to do was make it so that it was even a little bit faster than the old female's speed. So it says the new speed, even in the notes here specifically says the new speed is faster than it was for both male and female pre-205. So it's actually been buffed since what it used to be. So it's nice to see them do that. I believe a lot of people can agree that balancing by buffs usually feels better than balancing by nerfs, but we all really should look at that and say, you know, you can't always balance by buffs or everything, or basically it becomes meaningless, because then you're going to have to buff the enemies as well, which, you know, nerfing has to happen. But in this case, really, buffs were the right direction to go. The animation for Earthquake was apparently also sped up a little bit for Barbarians. So, hey, yay for Barbarians. 2 minor fixes. Alright, next is Monks. Yeah, I'm sure Monks have been really waiting for some changes because they feel that they really need more, and I don't entirely blame them. I think there were some nice steps in the right direction with the changes to elemental builds, but there needs to be more. And there's going to be more, just not right now. So, let's look at the philosophy. They say they want... They felt that momentum was not as strong as other monk passes. Okay, so this is the passive that you get on a monk at level 66, where moving 30 yards increased your damage by 15% for 4 seconds. So you move 30 yards, you get a 15% increase, only happens for 4 seconds. So what they do to buff this? Well, they made it so you only have to move 25 yards instead of 30. They also increased the damage bonus from 15 to 20%, and the duration has been increased from 4 to 6. So they feel that this should help momentum be as effective as some of the other passives that you have in the monk tree. Now, aside from that, they say there are no other additional changes really at this time. They want to buff other abilities in a future patch. So what they're saying here is, you know, yeah, okay, we gave you a minor buff to a skill that we see as being underused, or a passive in this case. But please don't fret, there's going to be more, they're just not ready yet. They'll be in the next content patch more than likely. It's looking like what they're doing is they're going to be gearing up for 2.1. So we're probably not going to see any major changes until 2.1. And 2.1 theoretically should be the major content patch where we get the seasons and the ladders, the tiered rifts, and all of that Blizzard has basically been teasing about. The only other fix listed here, of course, is for Pillar of the Ancients. Now, Pillar of the Ancients was recently changed from being a pillar that came up, did damage, and then a few seconds later exploded. Now it comes up and it does AoE damage as lightning. Some people were saying that they didn't really care for the change because it had collision. It was causing pathing issues for players and monsters alike. So you could actually cheap out the game a little bit by using the pillar to block enemy movement and things like that. Apparently that wasn't intended. The pillar was meant to come up and just kind of blow up, or in this case, just do the AoE. And so they've removed the collision from the pillar. So now if you want to try Pillar of the Ancients, now's a good time to do so, see how it feels. So it'll come up, it'll do its AoE, but it's not going to block any pathing anymore. And that's really it. That is the changes to characters. So what are these supposed big changes, you might be asking? Well, let's talk about that. Let's start with the items. So the drop rate of all class-specific set items, these are the Torment-only items. Well, some of them might be more than Torment-only, but the set pieces for specific classes have had their drop rates improved. I kind of like this change because being a victim of RNG myself, I've seen a lot of people around me that have full sets that I haven't even completed anything on. And it's made me kind of sad. So I'm kind of glad to see that, because a lot of these sets are really what you're gearing towards in the end. And not only that, but there's been talk about adding more class-specific sets. So I'm thinking that they're doing this in a move to help us get to these sets so that once they introduce more, we'll have something, and then we'll also have something to look forward to. Now, another change to items, and this one directly affects monks, so this is technically a monk change as well. Items for the monk sets, or the monk set bonuses, have been improved. The Monkey King's Garb, for example, it's 4-set bonus. The weapon damage used to be 100%, it's now 1600, so that has been massively buffed. The delay on the explosion reduced from 1 second to half a second, so it happens faster. And it also had an issue where the spirit counter was reset when items were picked up. So it's one of those items that you spend a certain amount of spirit and then it does something, and that was being reset, meaning that if you were picking up items, you weren't seeing it as often, so it probably seemed like it was a terrible, terrible set. The other set for monks, the Raiment of 1,000 Storms, has also been buffed on its 6-piece set bonus. It will now only be triggered by Dashing Strike, but the weapon damage it does has been improved from 100% to 3,000%, 30 times the previous damage. The radius was decreased by 5 yards because of this, but the damage is made crittable, so it can crit now. The target cap has also been removed, so apparently it used to affect only 6 targets. Now it can affect any number of targets that you hit, but the visual effect will still show only 6, so I imagine that is a change that may be changed in the next major content patch, but at least know it will happen, you just don't visually see it. Alright, the other major change is really something I did. This is the one that came out of left field for me. So let's talk about, this is the legendary crafting recipes. They've had several changes. First of all, let's talk about their philosophy. Legendary crafted items are meant to be both a stepping stone into in-game items and a good place to spend crafting materials at the end game. While they liked the fantasy of having the unique crafting materials, obtaining them was either keeping too many players from being able to complete the recipes in a timely manner, or encouraging game flipping in similar, less than ideal patterns of play in order to acquire them. As such, they have removed the requirements for unique items when crafting legendaries. That's right. So you may remember in the last patch, they just removed the requirement of needing specific gear. If it was a headpiece, you had to find some ascended headgear. If it was a one-handed weapon, you had to find that specific one-handed weapon in a white form. It couldn't be blue, it couldn't be gray, couldn't be yellow, it had to be white. And white is one of those things that's not quite as common as it used to be. So that was very difficult to do, and they finally said, you know what, we don't want you having to go and hunt that doesn't feel right. But they still left in the legendary crafting materials. It was kind of a neat little gameplay thing because each crafting material had something you had to go after, a particular class of enemy or certain zones. So it was kind of neat that it added a little bit, I guess, of a lore or flavor. But in this case, they felt that it's creating gameplay that they don't want you to do, and I understand this. So let's talk about this, the good and the bad. The bad is that we're losing a little bit of that lore, that flavor, right? These items were things that they had flavor text to them. They were things that kind of made sense. You know, they would drop off of certain enemies, so it's like, hey, I'm going to take this piece of my enemy and use it to make something better. All right, that's kind of a neat idea, that you are basically salvaging something from your opponents in order to use their power against your enemy. And I think that's a really neat idea, and a lot of games do it really well. But here's the thing, and I do agree with them mostly on this change. is that, yes, it created this scenario where you were going and farming these spots over and over again. Now, we've talked many times in the past about how Blizzard didn't like it where people were doing these things like Pendleskin runs or just straight up Mephisto or Bale runs from D2. You know, they didn't want people to just feel like they're going in to play the game and farming this one area hours on end nonstop until they found the specific item that they wanted. And that's what these legendary crafting materials were threatening to do again. They weren't necessarily the best. There are, you know, the set pieces that you're working towards are usually a little better, but some of these items were pretty powerful. And there were some that had some pretty nice bonuses. I know I specifically was looking for the set that doubles your Death Breath production, right? It makes 2 drop instead of 1. The downside with that is when I was farming it, 1, they hadn't doubled or they hadn't increased the legendary drop rates yet. 2, the materials you need for it only drop in Whimsyshire. And then only specific enemies in Whimsyshire. So I farmed Whimsyshire for a good while, even after they buffed the drop rates of these materials, and never really ultimately found it. I thought that when they had increased the drop rates that was where they were going to end it, because that felt a little bit better. It was a little easier to get some items. The downside is that some of those items were exceptionally easy to obtain. I remember there being one I was looking for that was on a boss that dropped in Act 2 at the end of the Dagler Oasis. Just kill the snake boss over and over again and you get your items and you're done. And that's, you know, that's not interesting. You know, the lore set pieces and whatnot, that's kind of interesting, but the materials themselves and how you ultimately got them in a gameplay standpoint just didn't work. Now, if they took these pieces and made it so that you could use them towards improvements to gear or something like that, maybe it could work. Like if it was a different system other than just crafting the item. But as far as the way it would work in the Diablo 3 systems as they exist right now, I just don't think that it really panned out the way they wanted to. And I really don't think it created all that compelling gameplay. Because honestly, I would rather be out going, fighting. One thing I felt really that I didn't like about it especially is that it felt like you could not get these materials from rifts. I believe you could. It's just that if there were certain things you wanted, you were better off not doing the rifts. And I wanted to do rifts because there was a better chance of getting legendaries, obviously, the double drop rate inside of a rift. But if I was doing a rift, I wasn't possibly getting these materials that I wanted for set pieces that might help get me the pieces that I really do want. So it's one of those catch-22s. You want to get these pieces so you can help yourself get the gear to farm the pieces that you really want. But at the same time, it's not as efficient or fun. You know, I like doing different things, and that was kind of the problem. Like, I would sit there and I would get bored very easily if I was running one area over and over again, trying to find one particular item. So that's kind of why I like this change, because I just don't think that gameplay of saying, okay, I'm going to go to this exact same waypoint, go this exact same route every single time. I couldn't do things like the Alkaiser route for experience. I couldn't. It's just the same thing over and over again. And so that's me, though. That's me. So this is definitely a change that not everyone's going to agree with, and I fully acknowledge that. And, you know, I just honestly think that for most people, this is going to be a better change. Obviously, you can feel free to disagree with me, and that's what the comment section is for. But I overall think I like this change. Okay, so there's that. So let's go ahead and go on with the patch notes. We've gone ahead and we've talked with that. The unique crafting materials are no longer required anymore. The legendary crafting materials will not drop. The existing crafting materials will be gray, and they have an increased sell price. So those of us who have a few of those, especially if you have a lot of those adventurers journals, you're going to get some money off of those. So hopefully you kept those instead of getting rid of those. Now, conversely, there's been a couple changes to the way the crafting works as well. Level 70 crafting sets and legendary items with unique properties will now require additional Death Breath because of this. So if you've got a pattern that has a specific, possibly build-changing stat on it, the Death Breath requirement is going up. Now, the good news is that the level 70 legendaries that don't have unique properties no longer take Death Breath at all. So it is much easier to create an introductory legendary set for a character that you've just leveled. Simply because a lot of those legendaries are really just 6 property items that can possibly break stat caps that yellows could not. Really, that's all they were. They were legendary only in the fact that they had 6 stats guaranteed. Really, that's it. And it's nice to know that the cost of them are now appropriate for that. And it's nice to know that, hey, I can come up now with a set. I can get up to level 70, and I'm going to buy a bunch of legendary pieces just to get my stats up. But it's not going to be all that interesting. That's what farming is going to be for, and then farming the enemies for the legendaries that do give special stats. I think that's nice because what that does is reward those of us who have been playing for a while. You have to think about that. These legendary sets, or these legendary crafting materials, or these legendary crafted legendaries, I'll learn to talk eventually, you have to find them to begin with. Now granted, the drop rate of these has been improved, but this is not something that's meant to make the game really easier, at least not on the first time around, because at the first time around, you're not going to have access to them. It's going to be on subsequent characters. So really, there's probably going to be an argument that, oh, they're making it easier now. They're going to make it super easy to get loot. It's going to be boring because why would you care? Because you're going to have all the maximum loot at the end, just like you did on the auction house. That's not really true. You're going to have an introductory set. It's almost like getting a, in World of Warcraft, you had a starting raid set that was crafted for you. Like, usually the starting raid sets were crafted in WoW. And then you earned everything else by raiding. And that's kind of what this mimics in a way. So you're going to have an introductory legendary set that's going to help you. Mostly if you've been playing the game already. So there's that. Now, also, because of this change, the Mystic no longer requires any Death's Breath to train. So the Mystic is now exactly the cheapest, was always the cheapest in order to level up, and now more so. So no more Death's Breath required to level the Mystic. Only gold. And the Blacksmith and Jeweler now only require 1 Death's Breath each to learn the first rank of level 11. So it doesn't cost nearly as much to level up. That is something that will be a benefit to newer players, because I think most of us already have our artisans all the way up. So very interesting changes here all around. I mean, the class changes, you know, whatever. Those are fairly minor, especially since it's really only the monk. The Barbarian was fixed back to where they should have been, so I mean that doesn't even really count. So a small change to monks, and then after that it's all items. So again, you can see why it's a small patch, very small patch, because it was just changes of stuff that already exist. But their impact, I think, is going to be fairly large. So I'm interested to see what you guys think. Overall, I mean, I keep saying, and I keep saying that overall I tend to be happy with the decisions they're making, but it is kind of true. I mean, I can see where they're coming from on these, and I can also think of how lately I've been, you know, how I've been playing. When I do get a chance to get on, it's kind of nice to be able to get something done, feel like I've made some progress, and at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's too easy. Now, if you play the game a ton, like over and over, you know, if you're putting tons of hours in, then it may not be the kind of decision you would want to see. But I think that's why they're ultimately going to go to seasons, ladders, tiered rifts, and all that in the next content patch for people that have a bit more time that want to be able to put progress into that. For me, these decisions for the way I play have, you know, definitely been met with agreement for the most part. For the most part. All right. Lastly, the only other change really here is something that, you know, I had asked for. I know I had mentioned this on other videos. I wish I could take the credit for this, but I know there's no way. But the +2 percentage on skills is now in the details page on your character sheet. So you can actually see plus skill damage, plus elemental damage. Also, Paragon bonuses will be reflected in your character profile sheet as far as the damage, toughness, and healing. So when people are inspecting your character through that, they'll be able to see how that affects you. But yeah, I've been wanting that. I wanted a thing on my character sheet to show me you have +X fire damage so that I know which of my elements is my strongest set. You could mouse over each item and add it up yourself, certainly, but it's nice to have something at a glance. So that's pretty nice. That's it. That's the only change. Pretty much everything minor. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's 206. For Diablo 3. Please, again, leave your comments in the comment section below. I'll be happy to hear from you. So until then, ladies and gentlemen, until next time.